So we're building up our sense of the group, but also aware of any assumptions that the facilitator might be carrying, to kind of notice our own blind spots here as well. So wanting to sense what's going on, knowing that there's so much below the surface, so much beyond what we see immediately, allowing room for that. Considering the movements of the spirit that we perceive as we reflect on the group through interactions and conversations in the pre-work. What spirit is at work? And wondering, what does this mean? What am I beginning to consider, and what hypothesis am I forming for how I'm going to proceed, how we will proceed? That proceeding, listening to JP's stories, it takes a lot of courage, doesn't it? To slow something down or wait with something that emerges, not to rush as the facilitator. How to work with the time constraints to really trust what is, where attention is needed. So there's the facilitator hypothesis and sensing, and then to also wonder, how does the group interpret what's happening to them? How are they perceiving this step, this change, this invitation? What's going on for them? So you might say some more about this around the dynamics of grace or the narrative of the group.
Yes. So what is happening now is, after getting to know the different dynamics of the group, try to check, this is where we check, okay, if this is the dynamics of the group, how is the spirit moving through this? Okay. So this would be part of the reflections you have to make before you create a design for them. For example, if you see, the spirit is challenging this group of youth to get out of their comfort zone and somehow realize what exactly is the deeper meaning of life for them, then that is the time also that you can somehow think of, what's my own hypothesis about the group? Okay. What is an initial understanding that I have where I can lead them to be more open to the spirit? And that would be the data that you will need once you create your general method for discernment in common. Okay. So that will contribute also to having things validated with the group as well. Sometimes you need to meet them as a group to prepare them for discernment in common, to give a little orientation. And in that orientation, you can ask also, so far, this is what I'm hearing. This is the data that I got. What's your initial interpretation of the group? So you can open that as an initial discussion. Okay. Because in a sense, you are also creating that everybody can commit to the whole process of discernment in common. Okay. I think we can proceed now with a few more guide points, and Francis will help you. What are other guideposts that you have to watch out for?
So taking this to the exercises, and we'll have more on this tomorrow. Of course, we are looking for and noticing movements of consolation in the group, which of course we can consider as increase of hope, faith, love, interior joy, so that calls and attracts to heavenly things as we have it in the exercises. What does that look like in the group? How do we see that? And the contrary of that then, what about movements of desolation in the group or in some of the group? So some marks of that, indicators of there's the lack of hope, lack of confidence, feeling lazy, lukewarm, tepid, sad, cut off, separate. So what movements are we perceiving in terms of consolation and desolation? Where are the group at this time of my connection, our connection with them? And maybe it helps to draw on an image as you consider the group that you're working with and where they're at. Here are a few suggestions, but are they all dancing in sync together? Is there a harmony of movement or not? And similarly, thinking of music. Well, what's the song they are singing? Is there discordance, or is it, again, a harmony of all the voices? And the surfer catching the wave might be a bit of a lone ranger out on his own, but also could be encapsulate the group moving, receiving the wave and being carried along. The sort of skill of that, but also part of something bigger. And what's that one up to? Parachuting, or I can't remember what that's called, but with the currents of the spirit moving. So what would be an image that comes to mind for your group, where they are, where you'd like them to be, where you feel that would be helpful?
Okay. Maybe just a quick story when it comes to movements. And I'll continue with my story with Myanmar when I was asked to accompany them through the retreat and apostolic planning. One thing I noticed when I have been doing my interviews with them was that their situation is very, very challenging. Nothing seems to be in a normal situation at all. Everybody is tired. Everybody is hurting, and everybody is trying only to do the best that they can out of the situation despite their hurts. So I was thinking, is the community on desolation because they're going through challenges? And I had to pray over it. No? Because there is great difficulty in the situation, and they know that they have to grapple with senselessness of the situation. It's a really deep, I would say, it feels like desolation. But the big question in my mind was, is it really a real desolation? It feels like desolation, but is it a real desolation? So I have to check also, but is everybody still struggling together? Is everybody naturally coming together to grasp what can be done and continue to love despite the situation? Is everybody wanting to forgive despite the fact that there are deaths in the family? Is everybody still faithful to the mission? That's what I found out. That despite the external chaos, the community remains to be tight and together. So I said, oh, it's not a desolation. It's a difficult consolation. Okay. So it's something that, it's a situation where we need to allow God to take over this time. We can only do the most that we can because of the chaos. But this is a place where we have to give room for God to be Himself. That's a difficult discernment in common. Okay. In technical terms, you call that an impasse. Okay. You thought nothing is happening, but actually, the mission is being transformed below what eyes can see. And that requires more prayer, more realization. So the way we have to accompany the group is through the process of letting go and letting God. So the design of the process would be different. And I said, oh my God, what do I give them? This is way beyond the spiritual exercises. I don't know how to handle this. So inspiration came from St. Ignatius, and I felt like, oh, okay, let them go back to the two bookends of the spiritual exercises. Back to the first principle and foundation, and the contemplation to attain love, but go deeper. So the retreat was very much focused on that, going back to the basics, that all good things come from the Lord. And God continues to give Himself even in this situation. And it took us 8 days to go through it. Okay. So, and that required so much prayer. So to get there, the goal is to reach consensus. They reach a consensus where we need to look at our mission differently in a manner where the way we live as a community, regardless whether we say anything or not, would be what would other people feel as consoling in itself. So it became a quiet mission, a mission of example, a mission of living together in a manner that is deeply, deeply loving. So that's where they got themselves to. They reach a certain point of consensus, but it does not mean that each member is in consolation, but the group as a whole is in this movement. In my experience, usually when the group reaches consolation, not every individual is in consolation. A few others feel desolation because they have to let go of control. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Second, those who do not feel completely attuned to a decision acknowledge the group direction. So one indicator is everybody preferring what God prefers instead of what they prefer? That's holy indifference. That I choose what God desires of the community. And you will feel that. You will feel that in the community also that, oh, okay, I will let go of what I want because this is where the Lord is leading the whole group. Also, consensus is not unanimity. It's rather about sensing together. What is it that the Lord wants for the group? Let's rather go there. To me, understanding consensus this way makes the facilitation hopeful no matter how complicated the situation is. Okay. After having gone through Cambodia and Myanmar, I realized, oh, the Lord is much more involved than myself, actually, as a facilitator, more than I can ever imagine. Okay. So it's a very, very interesting mission because the grace that we deeply need as we accompany people will be there. So consensus is always, it has union of feelings, union of sense, and there is union in the spirit. But that doesn't mean there is union of votes, union of voices, and total agreement. That's not consensus. But rather, can the community listen to what God wants for the community? Okay. So discern consensus, it says here, is a decision prayed over individually and in community, carried into spiritual conversation until all members of a group understand and agree with the decision and take the commitment to go forth with the tasks and responsibilities included in that decision. And it's not a one-time event. It is a journey in itself to reach consensus. Sometimes it starts with reflecting on the history, and then after reflecting the history, it will be about, okay, how does the Lord define who we are? So this is a task where usually what I ask the group is, try to ask the Lord, pray over and ask Him, Who do you say that I am? Reverse the question with the Lord. Oh, who do you say that I am, Lord, at this point? Who do you say that we are as a community now, Lord? Okay. And then, you celebrate communion and reconciliation. Okay. There are some patching up that we need to do in the community after identity. And then we listen to desires and calls. And then we choose the means to respond. And then we confirm the choice. And then we plan. If you notice, the whole process follows the dynamics of the spiritual exercises. But don't forget a very crucial beginning, which is to formulate the question that you want to answer. If you miss that out, your process will be all over the place usually. So it's very, very important that you craft this first. And usually in the way that I do it, one spiritual conversation can be about looking at the history and then proceed to reconnecting with our identity, and then another spiritual conversation for reconciliation. Okay. At other times, I combine both history and identity, depending on the case. If they're pretty much clear about their history already, it's a matter of going back to the original grace and how the grace has evolved over time. So you can combine this into just one spiritual conversation also. Especially if, let's say, they contracted you for just 3 days, which is quite difficult and challenging actually. Because it takes a while for you to get here for a consensus. This is in itself a roadmap. The other option is you can meet once a month by face also. That's another option, but that will take time. So, what is important throughout the phase is to have the inner disposition to get to consensus. The continuing letting go of what I want so that I can listen to what God wants. That's the most important thing that we can especially facilitate on. Okay. Secondly, sometimes the temptation for us is that we thought the success of the discernment in common depends on us as facilitators. No. The success of the discernment depends on God. So don't take it upon yourself. If you think it depends upon you as a facilitator, that's a distraction. That's a temptation. So be very, very aware. Your task there is also to empty yourself and to continually listen to where the Lord is leading the group. As we continue our discussion on how to facilitate the whole roadmap to consensus, we will provide you with types of discernment in common depending on what you have gathered with the information that is available to you. So this discovery included about 8 types of discernment in common. Okay? And somehow it is very much related to where the community is in this particular journey of consensus. Okay? So it is also related to the main question that you are trying to discern on. If you are able to name the question, then most likely it will lead you to what type of discernment in common this probably I should set up on. So the first type of discernment in common is the discernment in common of principles. And usually when you go through this discernment in common, it focuses on these 3 particular questions. Who are we and what do we stand for? What is deeply important to us? And what is our deepest desire? Usually this happens with organizations or congregations who are beginning to realize that a lot of the members of the team would be are aging already, and they need to recover and to pray all over again about their identity. Okay. who are we and what do we stand for. So if there is a community, for example, their mission has ended and they're offered a new mission, they need to somehow discern all over again what they stand for, what is deeply important to them, and what is their deepest desire. In corporate parlance, this is usually part of reviewing your mission vision statement. So let's say another case for this would be you are asked to do a particular foundation, right? You are asked to, let's say, create a new school, or you are asked to create a new ministry for the youth, which you never had before. So it's very important to discern what we are and what we stand for. Okay, and that includes understanding what are specific values that we have to go back to make proper decisions. So somehow this allows everybody to realize what stays despite changes in the environment. Okay, so again, this is more about who we are, our mission also, and our identity, and then our values. Another type of discernment in common would be the people we serve. Okay. This happens with the Center for Family Ministries because what happened to them was they needed to understand who are the recipients of their programs that have stopped to get their service. And then also there are new recipients of their programs who are emerging for them. Okay? But the demographics has changed. So one story about the Center for Family Ministries is that back in 1987, they only have two types of customers. Number one, families who are asking for counseling. And second, those who want to become pastoral counselors. Those are the only two segments that they are serving. Come 2023, they realized from two in 1987, they now have 20 segments they have to serve. And they cannot serve them well if they do not reflect on this. Who are the people whom the Lord sent for us to serve? What are their consolations and desolations? And what are their deepest desires? So let's say you are being asked to serve a new segment, right? So for example, before in a parish, you will only take care of a certain jurisdiction. But then again, you are asked to go into a cluster of parishes. You need to go into a discernment where you get to understand the needs, the consolations, and the desolations of the people that the Lord is giving you anew. Same thing happened with the Emmaus Psycho-Spiritual Integration Center, where they have to understand how to serve lay people because that has not been their segment before that they serve. So they have to go deeper into the needs and really discern on what are the deepest desires of lay people when it comes to mental health. And how can they serve these people in a more efficient way instead of just one-on-one? Okay. So the perspective here is a focus on the recipients of the service. This is another type of discernment in common. And it comes usually from these three questions. Okay. You will notice the focus is different. No, it's not about us. It's about those whom we are serving. Okay. So just so you are not overwhelmed also with the focus of the prayer. The third type would be the discernment in common on purpose. What are we called to become? How would we know if we are bearing fruit? And where are our collective consolations and desolations? This is about the community again, but this is no longer about who we are. This is more about, okay, we are asked to evolve. We are asked to redefine our services. And we are being asked to define whether we are bearing fruit we continually create an impact on the people that we are serving. So this one is perhaps because of a different direction that you are taking. So the focus is not about who we are, because it's very clear to us. But it's more about, okay, is there a different way that we are headed towards? Okay. So the focus now is more refined towards, okay, is there a redefinition of what we are supposed to do? Okay. So here, it's very important to identify consolations and desolations, part of which is to understand what are the talents, the treasures, the time, and the togetherness that we have, so that we will know how to employ very well whatever gifts that we have received from the Lord, and continue to redirect our mission. Okay. So that's your discernment in common for purpose. So if you are doing your mission examen and you found out that, oops, we are asked to take another direction, most likely you will go through the discernment in common of purpose. Okay. And then another one is, once we are very clear of our purpose, it's time to also discern about, okay, if this is exactly how we are asked to bear fruit, then it's about time to do a discernment in common of preference. Okay. So this one is going deeper into, okay, where is the Lord sending us? Okay. In what horizons do we prefer to proceed? Okay. Do we, for example, you are given a new purpose to take care of the youth. Okay. If you are asked to take care of the youth, which part of the whole youth population will you cover? So you see, it's an understanding of, okay, what are the horizons that we will bring with the most ripple effect we can make. And this is usually the discernment in common when we try to identify the apostolic preferences. Okay. In what horizons? In a sense, this is asking, okay, what will be our playground? What needs will we address for the whole population? Do we cover everybody? Or do we cover only the leaders of the youth? Okay. So, in a sense, this is a process of more and more understanding where is the greater good and what greater impact should we create. And then once you have the preferences, you go through the discernment in common also of potential. What capabilities do we invest in? Who are we with as we drive the services? And how will we make our services sustainable? Okay. So sometimes our preference is clear, but the kind of collaboration that we will need to make the mission fruitful is something that we often forget to discern about. So sometimes we, for example, there is a specific mission for a Jesuit, um, and it has to be to go to a specific place where nobody is helping out really on that area. The Jesuit has also to discern, okay, what kind of network do I need to serve that community? In the same manner, for the groups that you will be helping discern on, in a sense, in what way can we expand our network so that we can serve the community better? Because if we don't know our network, oftentimes we will end up with volunteers who are burning out in the process, because there's only few resources that is left. Okay, so it's very important to know who who is or which group would be our extended mission partners for the mission. And there is often talk about sustainability of the mission. So one clear example is that many of our organizations would only have volunteers and they are not there all the time. So to make the mission sustainable, yes, we will have volunteers, but how can we make the most out of their availability so that they are focused on the most fruitful tasks at hand in the community? Okay. So that's another area for discernment in common. Another type of discernment in common would be priorities. And with so many, the moment we are able to understand the needs of the community that we are serving, we might need to identify, okay, which ones do we prioritize? Okay, which ones do we prioritize? Who will we focus on? What are their specific needs? And what programs and services will we drive for them? Okay, we cannot cover for everybody. Let's choose a specific segment only and then understand deeper what are the exact needs that are there. Okay. Sometimes we misconstrue Magis as covering for everything and end up tired at the end of the day. And part of the discernment for the community will have to be choosing the priorities. Another type of discernment in common is, okay, how do we proceed? We know our priorities, we know our talent, treasure, time, and togetherness, but how do we proceed as a community? So how will we nourish ourselves as we execute our mission? How do we hone our talents and resources? And how we continually work together better? So this is a continuing discernment of how to keep the mission alive and sustainable. And lastly would be progress. So how do we assimilate communal discernment and decision-making through the journey in such a manner that it's not just something one-off? There is a process, there is a cycle for us to do mission examine and then continue to discern. So the spiritual conversation becomes part of our way of proceeding. How do we track our progress and address concerns in the process? And then how will we adjust our sails and synergize our efforts? So as facilitators, our first task is to identify, okay, with the situation right now of the community, which can we introduce first among the 8 types of discernment? Okay. So that we don't get overwhelmed also. So maybe with the situation right now of your respective group, what possible type of discernment in common you most likely can introduce, given the information that you have? Because you don't. Sometimes we are so tempted to make things right immediately, but we have to go through the process of different conversations altogether. So with the kind of group that you have, what do you think would be the most appropriate discernment in common that you will, or discernment in common type that you would like to apply? Where would you like to start first? For the remaining of the time, we will look into, okay, we know how to proceed, but how do we kill consensus? Okay, which Francis will discuss on.
So let's think about, consensus is the goal of our discernment in common. And so here are some ways in which consensus can be killed before we get into the process. And we've named some of these already, that perhaps there's a lack of spiritual life in the participants, knowing how to pray or having a relationship with God, knowing how to reflect. So that dimension of the deeper way of reflecting. Lack of clarity of the roadmap of the process of decision making. So how are we going to proceed? Knowing that as facilitators, I guess, and the group. Yeah. Not being aware of personal predispositions, biases, preferences, so that self-awareness of the group involved. And obviously the awareness of the facilitators goes with that. Trusting in other means, but not in God. And during the process itself then, changing the question in the middle of the process. Not listening to that minority voice that we have mentioned, blanking that or setting it aside. And not using the time given for the purpose, getting distracted into other things rising, so avoiding it perhaps, or getting away from it, a fragmentation of focus. And a continued skepticism about the methodology, so a resistance that resonates. And then some possibilities afterwards as well, the consensus potentially reached during, after the process, rushing to reach and develop a decision. That must be very hard, because time is always the enemy and working within time. Not being able to assume commitment that reached consensus needs. So following through then on what we've arrived at.
What helps sometimes, Francis, is I would tell the major superior, I would already manage expectations. Given the time you are giving me, you're only giving me 3 days, it's possible that we will not reach a specific decision on how to proceed. Would it be okay with you if there are tentative choices that we can come up with if we are not able to reach a decision, and I can provide you with a process that you can do on your own? So that's how I usually help the community as well. Yeah, because for us, sometimes we feel the pressure of the time limit that's given to us, right? But we have to be realistic. We cannot force the spirit to come up with something immediately, because that depends on the disposition of everybody. So we have to manage expectations like, are you okay that somehow the output would be something tentative because we might lack data and we need to do additional data gathering for it?
Which is another response to the question about the role, isn't it, of the facilitator? Where does it begin and end?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, practically. And then the point about confidentiality, breaking confidentiality of the process of discernment. So taking outside of the group process what has come forward and been shared. And similarly expressing my disagreement with the group outside the group, very undermining. So here are many questions that the facilitators might want to be the team asking itself along the process.
This one is for you. When you go through the whole process, these are a list of questions you can look into as you go through the journey. Okay, asking questions like at the very start, do we need more information? Because you might need to reschedule the discernment in common if there's not enough. No? This is more for you as you go through the process.
You can see why working as a team might be a good way to go, as much as it's practical, holding these groups. And then just a point about the leadership conversion that we've named right at the start, this shift and movement from control to receptivity, embracing God's unpredictability. and moving to lead with greater humility and openness. So how to accompany and work with the leader in the process, encouraging this